This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Spectra 1964, Sampley, and Isotope. You're hearing my voice right now on the Spectra 1964 STX 100 mic pre through Isotope, RX, and Ozone, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD. So get ready to rock.
I don't really worry about the noise on a lot of records, especially jazz music. That little bit of hiss is so valuable. Next time, if you're ever working on a jazz record, put on Kind of Blue or something from that era and listen to the hiss. Just listen to the hiss that's going on. It's super obvious. If you stripped that away, you would have a very different sounding recording.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. The Spectra 1964 STX 100 mic pre provides unequaled headroom and linear output regardless of transient audio peaks, capturing critical details from your microphone. The 100 series amplifiers were used by Tom Dowd, Muscle Shoals, and the Record Plant on records by ZZ Top, Aerosmith, and John Lennon. Now you can get that same incredible sound in your studio at spectra1964.com or call them at 801-797-0642. In my studio, I've got the Mac Mini M1 paired up with the OWC Mini Stack STX Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expansion solution to connect to all my dedicated audio drives, sample libraries, and backup drives. It's the perfect size to stack with the Mac Mini and add storage and connectivity over Thunderbolt or USB. Whether you have the new or older Mac Mini, nothing stacks up in your studio quite like OWC. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Anthony Gravino, an independent music maker outside of Chicago, Illinois. He has worked with a wide variety of artists across multiple genres as a producer, recording engineer, mixing engineer, mastering engineer, and musician. Anthony has been on the show before for episode RSR361 when we talked about how he makes records in his studio, capturing great sounds for indie rock, jazz, and other genres, and more mixing tips later on episode 250 when we had Anthony back. And then, in fact, we've even taught mix clinics up in, or a mix clinic up in Chicago at Shirk Studios. And that was a whole lot of fun. So we're hoping to do that again in the future. Anthony has recently moved to a beautiful, tall, new loft space studio. I call it a loft space. It's a house, but it's got a huge loft in it called High Cross Sound, south of Chicago, in a beautiful home that looks like you might stumble on it strolling through the Hobbit Shire one day. Anthony loves to work with talented artists and musicians and record using classic vintage studio gear, making records that have beautiful and smooth tones. So we will talk about what's new with the studio and how his recording and mixing has evolved in the past couple of years. Please welcome back Anthony Gravino to Recording Studio Rockstars. Anthony, are you ready to rock yet again, my friend?
I'm ready, Lid. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you back, dude. It's been a minute since we got a chance to chat. How have you been? And tell us about your awesome new studio.
I've been doing great. The new studio is coming together little by little. I moved here about a year and a half ago from Chicago. It's a town called Urbana, Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. It's about 150 miles south of Chicago. And I bought, basically it's an old horse barn that is about 100 years old that was in the 80s converted into a house. And it's a big kind of 25-foot vaulted wooden ceiling main room. And then I built a control room up on this platform that's kind of a second floor control room looking down into the live space. And then actually, we're just finishing up building an isolation booth across from the control room. So it's going great. I love it here. It's really peaceful out here. And It's a good space. People like to come out here because it's conducive to getting your mind off other things and just really working on music. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's again, it's a beautiful location. I think you even have a swimming pool in the back, don't you?
I do have a swimming pool. It's a rather large swimming pool. I actually found out that the original owners built the swimming pool when they won the lottery.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so funny. That's so funny. I have a really close friend who had the house he bought in St. Louis was once owned by a lottery winner too. Were there any sort of like like sad stories surrounding the lottery winners, or did they have a happy ending of it?
Well, they're the people that I bought the building from, and I never actually met them, but they're quite the characters. They have quite a reputation around here, as does the house. Apparently, it was a party zone back in the day for quite some time. And they were really like kind of eccentric, and the place was just pretty like, it was kind of crazy. I saw some pictures of it. There were just like so many plants and shag carpeting and just like really kind of hippie-ish, I guess I would describe it. Really cool.
Did you keep any of the shag carpet going?
Well, there's carpeting. There is carpeting. It's not the shag carpeting to which I am referring, which was this red. This was some old picture I saw of the house.
Oh, okay.
It was this red shag. This stuff, the carpet that's here is just like a white, creamish colored. And there is some of it. It's down on the main stage in the performance space. It's kind of brick, and then there's a little stage built, and then there's carpet on that.
White carpet. So the parties weren't all that wild.
Well, it wasn't always like that down there. I think that they'd put that in not long before I bought it, probably to cover up all the wild days.
A white carpet until you have your first party.
Yeah, well, that'll go at some point. But
that's funny, man. Well, yeah. So, not to go too far off on a tangent, but my buddy, the story with that lottery winner was one of those like downward spiral stories where they won the lottery, and then all of a sudden all their friends started showing up, and then it got really bad, and then there may have been and then there were cameras put up all around the house, and then it was like it may have ended in bloodshed or something horrible. So
wow.
Let's hope the lottery just continues to be a good story over at your place.
Yeah, so far so good.
All right, good. Well, so you've got this big kind of open barn space for the recording space, but then you say you put your control room kind of up in the loft area, right?
Yeah.
How did that work? Did you have to build a wall?
Yes, I had to build 2 walls actually. So there was a platform, that is now the control room, that was when I originally bought the building open, and there wasn't a wall to the rest of the space. So it was just, you'd walk up the stairs, and at the top of the stairs you were on this platform, and it was just this big open space that wasn't closed off. So we built walls and a couple windows to close it off, make the control room up on the loft. And then across from that, looking out from where I sit, is where I'm building the booth, because there was a mezzanine over there, a kind of narrow, like 6 foot wide mezzanine that ran like 22 feet long and 6 feet wide. So I took half of it.
What's a mezzanine? It's
just like a little
mini porch up in the air above the open space?
Basically it's just like a platform that runs all the way across. It's sort of on the other side from where the room that I built a control room is. It's
like
really
you come out in your prom dress and show everybody.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it looked, but before I built the booth, it looked very churchy,
Right, okay.
I kind of cut that off a little bit, but anyway, it was kind of a useless space because of where it was and the size of it. And it's just like, all you could really do was store stuff, but then it's just sort of out there in the middle of everything. So I decided to turn it into a booth, because I needed an isolation booth.
So it's a way up high in the air booth.
It's a
20 foot by 6 booth.
Well, it sits probably about 12 feet off the ground. And then it is itself probably 8.5 feet tall. And then there's still a little bit of ceiling above that of the original vaulted ceiling.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, that should be interesting. Do you think that somebody would sing in the booth, or would it'd be like an isolated vocal during tracking or amps and that kind of stuff?
Yep, exactly. And there's a sight line. There's a window in the booth. So there's a sight line to the control room. There's a sight line down to the live tracking space. So somebody can be in there singing while a drummer's playing. Guitar amps can go in there. Acoustic guitar player can go in there. Just things. I record a lot of things where people are playing at the same time. And so a lot of time I just run into the problem of some quiet thing that needs to be isolated from the loud or DI things.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really have a space here to do that very well where they could see also. So that was the solution, and it's almost done. It's up. There's a few finishing things that we need to do.
So could you do acoustic bass in there, you think?
Definitely. Yeah. It's 11 feet wide and 5 feet wide and 11 feet long.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. I was talking recently, yesterday with Vance, actually, during my interview, we were talking about shotgun mics. And I remembered that shotgun mics are generally pretty flat response, and they're sort of do this remarkable job of blocking everything else out. And I just realized I've never tried one on an upright bass.
No, neither have I.
But I wonder if that would be a cool way to record a bass and isolate it from other things. But also with the long space like yours, I wonder if you could put a shotgun mic on the other end of the 11 feet pointing at whatever instrument. That could be kind of fun.
Yeah, there's definitely room in there for that.
Do you have any shotguns?
No, I don't. But lately I've been thinking about buying just some sort of these utility things, like not the fancy, expensive, cool thing, but like, one thing I was looking at was those little, I think it's Audio-Technica makes those little clip-on mics, those little condensers.
Mm-hmm.
They're like
lavalier
$130
kind of things.
Yeah, they're not quite lavaliers, but they're a little bigger than that, but not much. And they just have clips. So like put it on a horn or put it on a tom. You know what I mean? Just they're
condenser.
Real. Yeah, I saw a thing with Al Schmidt, and he was talking about how, he was using them on toms and he just loved them. And I did a little research. I haven't actually got to use one yet, but I did some just listening to different stuff that people had recorded with it. And I was like, these might be really cool, for $130.
Well, I did buy a lavalier, an Omni. It was an Omni, yeah. And with the idea of actually clipping it onto and putting it right there on an acoustic. And I remembered I'd heard about James. Oh my goodness, my brain's moving too slow this morning.
James Taylor?
Yeah, thank you. James Taylor doing that for his sort of finger picking guitar stuff. And they would do things like have one on the inside. And we did that years ago at the first studio I was at. We had a mic on the inside of the guitar facing out towards the strings. And you can get some really wild sounds like that. And I guess, somewhat isolated, just because it's so close to the finger picking. But I think those kind of clip-on and lavalier mics could be a lot of fun to do that sort of stuff with.
Yeah, I just find myself needing, things that are solutions in situations.
Yeah.
And particularly with respect to bleed. And you never know. I always try to allow for a little bleed and use that as part of the musicality of the situation. But it doesn't always work. And so when it doesn't work, it's good to have tools that might solve the problem. I know that like a lot of people use like those Sony ECM mics or stuff on acoustic guitars when they're tracking live. I've read people talking about that. And I think that I need to try that.
What are those ones?
I can't remember the model. I just remember reading this article. I think it was The Gambler by Kenny Rogers. I was reading some Sound on Sound article. I always thought that track sounded really good. I was reading an article and they said that the acoustic guitars, because it was all cut live and they were in the room, so that they used
like Sony C37s or that kind of thing.
No. They're like lavalier mics, or they're like clip-on mics. Sony, I think it's an ECM and I can't remember the number, but
I also have these old Altec tube lavalier mics that have like mini peanut-sized tubes in them, and I never use them on sessions, and I need to remember to try busting that out for an acoustic guitar. It's one of those funny conundrums because as artists, we love all this stuff, but as practical engineers, the artist in us can easily get told to take a seat, please, in the back of the control room and let me do my job, and we'll reach for the mic that's working today and easy to use. But it really is a lot of fun when you allow yourself to explore like a new oddball way to record something and see what it sounds like on a session.
Yeah, I mean, necessity is always the mother of invention for me on that stuff,
Yeah.
It's like
that and Frank Zappa.
I have starting places, but I'm not bound to them.
Yeah.
And so again, it's just like the more that my situation evolves, and it's different here than it was in my last space. Like some of the things that were really cool there maybe aren't as cool here, and vice versa,
Mm-hmm.
So as I've done sessions here, I've started to figure out where some of my needs are. I think that's a place. It's just like those kind of mics. They're not super expensive, but sometimes you just throw them up and it just does the trick and it sounds great. It works as part of the illusion, So those are people get really obsessed about the really nice mics, and it's nice to have some of them, but I think they tend to downplay those kind of things like what you're talking about now, like the shotgun mic or the lavalier mic, or those things have their place in creative recording too.
Yeah, I mean, so a lavalier could be cheap. I mean, $100 less, depending on what you're getting. I mean, there's so many wonderful cheap mics too, like the Octava MK12s.
Mm-hmm.
Those ones I remember they used to be $100 a piece or something like that. Those things can sound great, and a lot of times we can get much more excited about a sound that's unusual and somehow really creative than whether it sounded like it was on a fancy, expensive mic.
Oh yeah, I mean nobody's, except for geeks, are listening to that.
Yeah,
They're just listening for emotional content, and the path of that is not clear.
Wait, so you're not putting on the credits on the back of your vinyl pressings all the engineering specs for how you recorded the bands like the old days?
Actually, it's funny you say that. No, but on these analog, I do these all analog recordings where it's direct to 2-track tape, and then he sells tapes, like 1/4-inch reels to audio files, copies. And he does actually put all the microphones and the mixer and the tape machine on the label of the tape, because the audio files actually want to know.
That's great. I love that. So wait, who is that again?
His name is Jonathan Horwitz, and it's called International Phonograph is the name of the company.
Okay.
He's been doing it for about maybe like 12, 13, 14 years. All analog, nothing digital can touch it ever. That's his sort of MO. He does some of the recordings himself on an 8-track and then mixes it down. And then sometimes he has me do recordings or mixes for him. Just depends.
Now, I don't know if I remember seeing his name as we were sort of putting together a Spotify playlist for you, or just a music playlist. Would that be because they were only sold on tape, or did those also then get digitized and shared that way as well?
Most of them were only sold on tape.
Cool.
Some of them, I think he has put, you can buy like DSD files of them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like released.
If it's not audio file, it's not happening.
He's definitely deep in that audiophile world. And it's cool. Some of them are great. I mean, they're very natural sounding. He doesn't want like a hyped sound or a lot of reverb. It's very throwbacky. Does a lot of jazz. I did a couple blues things for him here. And
now have you been to his place and listened to the tapes on his system? I'm guessing he's got something that he's pretty proud of.
Oh, I've been to his place a million times. I go over there and help him calibrate his tape machines. He's always got some new speakers that he's listening. He's like always getting new stuff and has a new setup. He's got really nice Sony APR tape decks that he uses to make the copies, which are really similar actually to my MCI. It's like the same electronics, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Sonically really similar. So yeah, I've been over there.
Oh, he does. He spins off the copies himself.
Yeah, he makes the copies himself, and
that's such a cool business model. I love it.
It's great because it's direct to consumer, and he gets the orders and then makes the tapes. So it's made to order. So he doesn't ever have extras. There's not like, oh, you buy 1,000 and then you sell 300.
So he's doing the original NFTs for music. New freaking tape, dude.
That's great. I love that. I'll tell him you said that. I like that. Yeah. I mean, yeah, he's selling to a small, exclusive, we call it the silk pajamas market.
That's great.
What's cool about it is that he doesn't have to sell a ton of them to make a decent amount of money.
Yeah.
And he's a retired guy and he just kind of does this. It's just his thing, he's been doing for years. And it's really fun. It's fun to work with him because he loves music and he's really obsessed with the best sound that he can get all the time, and he'll go to great lengths. He bought some great mics and so yeah.
That's pretty exciting stuff. Yeah, that is encouraging. And the idea of making your own thing to send out as a musician and an artist is very exciting. And if I don't know what a tape would sell for, but if I was just guessing $50 for one or something like that.
Not even close.
Not even close. More than that.
They're between 150 and 200 a piece.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you sell 10 to 20 of them even, and you pay for stuff.
Yeah. You sell 100 and you make a good amount of money.
Yeah. Of course, you got to buy the tape too, and you got to ship it.
The tapes cost all that is about $75.
Yeah.
But the customers pay the shipping.
Yeah, there you go.
And I mean, it's a good business model because again, he doesn't have any upfront cost except for to just pay me and pay the musicians. That's what he does.
Yeah, I'm going to steal that as your intro clip for this episode. It's just going to start out like music comes in. It's like, but the customers pay the shipping.
Great.
All right, cool. Thanks for letting me go on, take us on yet another tangent.
I'm all about tangents.
Well, that's cool stuff. So now you're doing tape. So you moved into your new space and you have more space now than you used to, or less than your old studio?
Oh, more. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's a nice logical evolution and progression of a studio. I recently had to let go of a bunch of studio stuff because I don't have enough space. And I remember thinking to myself repeatedly, man, if I just had more space, I would keep all of this. I wouldn't get rid of any of this stuff. I would just move it over and stuff. Want to know how I get a consistent sound quality mixing hundreds of episodes of Recording Studio Rockstars? Well, I've been cheating all along by using Isotope RX and Ozone on every single episode. Right now, you're hearing RX declick, declip, DS, deplosive, voice denoise, ozone multiband compression, EQ, and limiting on this podcast episode. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at isotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Before your band hits the studio, it's smart to have all the songs and notes in one place. But setting up a shared cloud folder can be frustrating. There's always someone in the band who can't seem to log in or wants to use a different platform. Samply.app makes it easy to add collaborators to a project so that the whole band can upload new songs and make comments before the session. It's file sharing that was specifically built for music. Just upload a voice memo or song and start commenting. Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at Samply.app or use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months. So tell us about the new space as far as like, what does it feel like to have more space? What did that, what were some of the changes you made from one studio to the next? And what are you excited about in your new space?
Well, it couldn't be more of an opposite kind of a situation because on my old space the rooms were small and I had them pretty dead for the most part. There was like a stairwell that I could use as sort of a live space that led into the space. But generally speaking, I tried to avoid capturing the room there a lot because it wasn't particularly friendly.
Right.
Quite the contrary, here, the room has all kinds of cool options. It's not overbearing by any stretch, but it's very diffuse and natural sounding in the mics. I've noticed that I can really, in this space compared to the other space, I've really been experimenting more with the polar patterns on the mics, experimenting more with getting people really far away from the mics, and
Nice.
Making that the sound, and just like literally kind of, when you're doing stuff like tambourines or shakers or hand claps or backing vocals, just getting people to, like, while the track's going, listen and just in some different spots and see, and or maybe try Omni and see how that sits in the track. And here it's really nice because the room sounds good. The room just works on so many things. And
what are the surfaces?
It's all wood, basically, except for, well, most of it's, there's a lot of cedar, and then there's some barn wood on the ceilings, old lacquered barn wood. And then one of the walls in the live room, actually two of them, are sort of, it's a weird what they did. It's like plaster, but it's kind of not smooth, and it's in between the studs, and then it's painted.
Okay.
It's like spray foam and then plaster over that. So it's all irregular. It's not flat, it's sort of.
Yeah, that's a little bit like mine. We did what they call popcorn ceiling spray all over the drywall and then painted on top of that. And one of the benefits of doing that is we didn't have to tape and sand the drywall, which turns out to be stupidly expensive.
And really dirty, really, really messy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so the surfaces, I mean, the room sounded, the first time I walked in here, when I came to see the place before I bought it, I was just like, this room sounds really good. I clapped my hands. I kind of talked and sang a little bit, and I was like, wow, it's already, like, I don't have to change anything, and it's already a very musical room,
You're like, I'm going to buy this place.
Turning it into a functional studio was challenging, It took some time and planning and effort. Now it's all set up, and it's really great. It's fun, and it's a creative tool that is far superior to my last space.
Did you have to solidify any of the walls to the outside as far as preventing sounds from going in or out? Or is it in the location where the location means you didn't have to worry about that stuff?
I have to worry about that stuff a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I did some. There'll be more done in the future. The booth's pretty tight. The control room back wall got tightened up quite a bit. We had to totally replace the bathroom exterior wall, but that's a whole other non-studio related story.
Right.
But generally, we've tightened things up pretty good. I mean, it's not perfect. And, it's like I live out here in the sort of farm area, sort of right on the edge of town.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's like, I mean, at night, it's dead quiet, starting at like 6 o'clock at night until 10 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes during the day, there's like farm machinery and stuff like that. But it's much quieter than, say, my Chicago space, for example. That was in a very busy neighborhood where there's constantly
horn honks and
sirens and
and hot dog salesmen.
Yeah, all that stuff. So relatively speaking, it's pretty peaceful and quiet out here. And the space is great. I love it. I mean, I can just do so much more. I have the option of tightening things up if I want to, but if I just open things up, it seems to me to be a little more of a, I don't know, it's like a built-in cohesion that I can get from the room that I couldn't get from my room in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, you might get away with more musicians in the same open space now than you could before.
Right. Or like bleed from the guitars into the room mic with the drums will be musical.
Right.
As opposed to problematic, opposed to, oh, no, I can't use those room mics because that guitar bleeds just sounds weird in them because it's a small room and it makes them sound dumpy, or whatever. Now it's like there's this space around things that just makes it more musical to me, more usable.
That's cool. I have a loft space in my studio, but it's not, the studio space itself isn't quite as spacious as what your area is. So I'm somewhere in between. Like I find the room mic to be useful, but there are plenty of times where I'm like, I'm sick of hearing that room mic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I want to make dead records.
Yeah, I like making dead records too, but it's nice to be able to do either one. I just, like the more that I can not have to lean on reverb for that third dimension in the sound, I feel like the better things tend to be. And not that I'm against using it or anything, but I try to get that built into the sound if it's supposed to be that way. And here it's just, it's really a lot easier. The drum got this nice drum room sound that I can just, one thing I did when I got here was I bought a nice stereo ribbon microphone.
What'd you get?
An AEA R88.
Nice.
And that's a lovely mic. And I just thought, I'm going to have this room. I want something that I can, really work with the room. And what I've been doing is just that mic is just kind of in the room somewhere when I'm overdubbing and on a couple faders. And then, just kind of working with whatever the close mic is. And then I can just bust that into the signal, with the close mic and blend it in a little bit and just sort of always have that as an option while I'm tracking. Like, oh, should this be roomier? Well, what's that sound like? Just pull the faders up and throw it in the bus. And I do a lot more of that here than I ever did in Chicago, just because, again, the room tends to work.
Yeah. Well, ribbons are so nice too. They do a really great job of letting you turn up the sound of a space and, kind of keeping it pleasant sounding.
Yeah.
Not always, but a lot of times.
Yeah. I've noticed whenever I have a drummer here and we're recording drums, if I'll play it back for him, and sometimes I'll solo up some of the mics for him to let him hear, what everything sounds like. And it's like that one is the one the drummer's always like, "Oh, what's that? That sounds good," which is something for me to note, because it's like, well, that's the one that the drummer's reacting to. So there's something about that sound that makes that person feel like that sounds like them.
Yeah. I mean, I'll go so far as to remind us that it makes it sound like they now have a certain kind of instrument in their hands. It's like if you hit something and it creates a sound that you hear in the headphones, or you play something on a guitar and it creates this cool new sound that comes out of the speakers, it's like we discover like, oh, that's a thing I can play now. That's an instrument I can play musically. And that's why it's so important to make sure that it sounds cool in the phones, because otherwise, what are they playing?
Yeah, because they're hearing it and they're reacting to that. And that exciting sound makes them reach for places that they probably wouldn't ordinarily reach if they weren't hearing it that way. You know?
Yeah. Let's give like tough love feedback here. If you strummed your guitar and what you heard was the sound of a fart, it would be a very different experience for you playing that instrument, But if it comes back sounding like a guitar, you get excited about it.
Right. And if it comes
you might get excited if it's a fart machine. I don't know.
Well, I got a story about, I met the guy who built the fart machine right before the fart machine dropped. It was hilarious. I was at this, it was actually my friend's sort of wake celebration of life. And I met this guy there, and he had one with him in his pocket. I was talking to this guy, and he pulls it out, the original fart
during
machine.
the wake.
It was after. We were having drinks at the studio. This guy was a studio owner. It was a party. It was a party celebrating his life.
Okay, all right.
And anyway, he pulls it out, and I couldn't believe it. I didn't get to hear it. And then like 3 weeks later, I'm watching the WGN morning news, and this dude is on there, and they're playing the fart machine on the WGN morning news. He's doing it. He's got a guitar player there with him, and the guitar player's playing, and then he'll switch the fart machine on, and then farts start coming out.
That's hilarious. I just saw a video recently, and I think it was somebody was on like one of the big talk shows, and they were all about their new fart machine, and they were playing it. I don't remember who that was. It was somebody famous.
Well, so here's the cool little thing about the fart machine. It's just a sampler. And he told me that you can actually put any sound you want in there. 2 sounds. You can have 2 sounds. And that there's a way you just open it up, and there's a way you can just like
load a sound.
Yeah, load a sound in there. And so
technically you can load in your own farts.
Yeah. Okay. It could be like the sound of you peeing machine, or whatever you want it to be, really, So anyway, that's really way off topic. But
I had no idea we were going to talk about fart machines on today's episode. This is great.
Me neither.
But just a reminder, most of the time, those are welcome outside of the studio.
Yeah. It's not a real
actually, the machine, that's like the only version that's welcome in the studio.
Yeah.
Oh, man. All right. Let me see here. So what else? So now you've got a console, and you're continuing on with a console and a tape machine. You're also using Pro Tools. Talk to us about the tools that you're surrounded by. Are you in your control room right now?
Yep. I'm in my control room.
What do you look around and see?
I am sitting in front of an API 1608 console.
Ooh.
And I'm using Neumann KH310 monitors and Oratones. And so that's
you've moved on from the eggs. I think you had the egg.
Yeah. I got rid of the eggs, that was a big. I really am happy about these Neumann monitors. They're wonderful.
Nice.
I've gotten a lot of people who come over and heard them, and engineers, and been like, "Man, these sound great," because a lot of people haven't heard them, and they're wonderful. They're perfect for the space, and they're really true, and they're more accurate than what I had before. Let's just say that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a tape machine. I don't use the tape machine like constantly, but it gets me certain work, and it is a cool creative tool in the mixing process sometimes.
Yeah.
It's an old MCI that was refurbished by Chris Mara, and it's cool.
Oh, cool.
The other day I actually had an experience with it. I'll just interject. And I was thinking I'd print this mix to tape and, maybe it'd help it out, make it sound a little better to me. And I printed it onto the tape, and I didn't like what it had done. And then I just kind of started playing it back, but through the electronics on the tape machine, which I've got these like transformer cards in there that have input and output transformers that you can switch in and out.
So is it a JH110 or is it a different one?
It's a JH110C. Yeah.
But the transformer, that's a modification.
It's a card that Mara makes that replaces the original card that lets you either use the original circuit or switch transformers in and out.
Okay, because my JH16 had transformers and it sounded awesome.
Yeah. So it reminds me sort of like the Ampex sound when you flip the transformers, and they're colorful, But on this mix, it was just like, oh, no, that's what it needs. It needs this, that did the trick. Like the tape was a little too much, but.
But going through the cards with not even hitting tape. Just
correct.
That's a cool trick with tape machines that was fun. I did that some of the times, but not often.
Well, I don't know. I don't have any scientific information to back this claim up, but there's something about the way, and maybe it's the load or something, but the way that the outputs of the tape machine interface with the converters compared to the console is different. It's slightly different. Mm-hmm. And that's something in the difference too, I believe. There's the circuitry in there, but then there's also this other thing that I think's at play. Is it's just like the console into the tape machine. That's like the consoles were made just to go into that,
Yeah. Well, there's an impedance matching. I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
I remember reading in the Abbey Road book that everything was perfectly matched. I thought it was 200 ohms. Like every input and output was impedance matched throughout the studio, so that all the gear hooked up perfectly.
Yeah, and there's definitely something to that. So anyway, I've noticed that sometimes that's cool to just put that in the mix bath.
Yeah.
And it adds a little weight without like shrinking up the stereo. Like the tape kind of slightly collapses the stereo image to me sometimes. And this when you hit the machine, you get some of the sound without that sort of collapsing.
Yeah. So if I had the fart machine, I would probably load it up with a Thomas Dolby clip that went, "Science," for every time something like that comes up.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, I have no scientific evidence to back that up, but that's just a hunch I have.
All right. I'm saying it again live on the podcast. I want to get Thomas Dolby on the show, and I'm going to keep trying. I've tried. I haven't been able to get through to him yet, but I'm going to keep trying to get him on the show one day too as well.
He seems like he could be elusive.
He could be. He's been teaching for years, I think, in
Canada?
Baltimore.
No? Baltimore. Okay.
Yeah. At
MIT?
No, I forgot what it's called.
Baltimore.
School of Music in Baltimore, Maryland.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. You've got the API console. So you moved on from, you used to have the API box, and now you've got the larger format.
Yeah. About 2 years ago, I bought this.
And that's a new model console from them, or this is an older one that you've brought back into use in your studio?
It is, I guess, the first iteration of the 1608, which is a newer-ish console. This one's, I think, about 12 years old, 11 or 12 years old.
Okay, what's some of the features of that console that you really dig? Like, what does it do? How might you route some things?
Well, it's a great tracking console. I've got Trident EQs in it, these 80B EQs. And so, it's just great to just get a band up on it and just, it's so easy to do stuff. It's got 8 buses and 8 aux sends. So when you're tracking, if you want to do parallel stuff, which I like to do, it's really easy. Just push a button, and send it somewhere.
And the reason you can do Trident is because they're 500 slot modules or something like that?
Yep, that's right.
Okay, so you could stick just about anything in those modules.
You can put any 500. You have 24 500 series inputs at the top.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's nice. And so, yeah, and then I like to bring up mixes on the console so that I can put some of my outboard gear on it. So when I switch around to mix, it's nice to get, even if it's like 10 or 12 tracks of just tactile right in front of me, and then I can patch in a couple compressors. Got some old Uris and stuff and that I like to use, and some Pultecs, stuff like that.
And that gives you the ability to kind of get closer to a mixed sound during the recording stage.
Oh, definitely. And I'm pretty aggressive about recording with whatever I think it needs. It's not to say I'm like compressing everything to death or EQing everything crazy, but
you might throw a fart machine and record it with a stereo ribbon mic.
Yeah. Anyway, I like to use it because it's, first of all, it's simple and it's pretty easy to fix when things go wrong with it. And it sounds really good. I actually swapped out all the op amps with some different op amps, which I thought made a slight improvement in the sound. I did some testing first on the stereo bus, and then so that, it's just a great sounding console. It's got a great monitor section, and it's got inserts so I can interface all my outboard gear real easily, and, have some things just always up, like my play reverb comes up on a couple returns. It's just set up for quick workflow so that I can just get things going without having to think about it too much and interface the analog gear. And then it's real easy with the buses. If I want to print stems, I can just do it in usually a few passes.
And then, so you would go through the console on your way into Pro Tools, but then you might be listening to Pro Tools on just a stereo output.
Yeah, generally when I'm tracking, I'll just be listening. I'm listening through the console still. It's just a stereo output into a stereo return on the console. So it's still going through the console.
In the master section, yeah.
Correct. Yeah, there's 8 returns on the console, and 2 of them I have just dedicated as like main Pro Tools out for everything that doesn't get on a fader,
So would you encourage the rock stars, if they've got like some other, mixer that they had around, to experiment with that in their studio, like try recording through the mixer and doing some parallel sounds and working that way? Like if somebody even had a Mackie board or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, there's no reason to not try that stuff, I mean, you also have to assess whether or not it's like helping or not, but but they're tools, you know what I mean? And even if it's like, if you need to, a lot of people have a lot of outboard preamps, right? Or an interface with preamps in them, but it's like, you can't really bust things together, like multiple microphones in that scenario, and I like to do that. I do that all the time. So having the console, or even just like a little thing that has a couple aux sends, or just, allows you to combine 2 guitar mics onto one track if you like to do that kind of thing, or put a,
I feel like drums would be the no-brainer for me.
Well, yeah,
I'd love to have
where I
parallel compression on kick and snare during a tracking session.
I do that every time. I mean, there's not a drum
or
tracking
the
session.
Sans amp. I mean,
or a lot of pedals.
Let's bring Chad Blake into this conversation.
Or put the drums through an amp and put a distortion pedal in between. With a reamper. Like all that stuff. Like I want to get some excitement going in the moment, and so I'm always trying one of those things. Sometimes I'll distort a module really hard on the drums, like run line level into mic level on a mic preamp, like a Neve mic preamp, and just like explode it,
Damn it, Anthony, you're getting me excited about recording. I'm going to hang up on this interview and drive up to Chicago right now. Let's record something.
Urbana. It's Urbana.
Oh, yeah, right. Urbana. Sorry. Champaign,
Urbana.
Do you guys refer to it as Urbana or refer to it as Champaign? Because I feel like Champagne sounds like Champagne.
Champaign is the larger, more well-known city. Urbana and Champaign basically just butt into each other. The campus of U of I is actually in Urbana. They're basically one town with about 100,000 people or so.
Now, isn't this Mark Rubel's stomping ground as well?
Yeah, that's right. His original, he grew up here, I think, and his original studio, Pogo, was downtown Champaign. I recorded there many times. And,
is that the one? Wait, is that the one that was a theater where you shared a story once about going down there? Unless that was Steven Shirk that had the story about a Pro Tools rig in a theater.
No, that was me too.
That was you, right?
That was not here. That was
okay.
Right. No, Mark's studio was. He built it. It was here forever. It was like a legend downtown, And he lived above it. It was right in downtown Champaign, and he lived above it, and the studio was on the first floor, and it was just a crazy, cool, wacky place,
That's awesome. If you're ready to discover the secrets to making your mixes sound great no matter what your studio situation, then check out my free mixing course, mixmasterbundle.com, where I show you how to get great sounding mixes in your studio using simple techniques and free plugins. And when you're ready for more advanced studio skills, then check out recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, where you can learn from Grammy-winning teachers to help you record, edit, mix, and master your best record ever. Use the code Rockstar right now at checkout for 10% off any course for a limited time. So Rockstars, if you haven't already listened to my interview with Mark Rubel, that was an early one, and we did that over at Blackbird, where he is the coordinator for the Blackbird Academy, teaching the next generation of young students how to make great records. And hopefully we'll have him back on soon. He's writing some pretty amazing books. I'll just leave it at that. I think he's working on a great book, and when that comes out, I hope to have him on the show again.
Exciting. He just did an interview with Bill Schnee.
Oh yeah, Bill Schnee. Yeah,
Bill Schnee and Tape Op. That was really good. He's a lovely man. I'm sure if you've met him, he's just so lovely, and
he's a keeper of the realm
in so many ways. Yeah.
All right, cool. So you've got the console, you got the tape machine. You're not always using the tape machine, but sometimes you do. You mentioned your stereo ribbon, the AEAR88. Am I saying that right? I think so. Right?
Yep.
So do you know John Cunabirdy?
Yes, he does that one mic series stuff.
Yeah, and that's what he uses. So
I know. That was actually one of the things that sold me on that mic, was how I saw some of those and I just thought, gosh, it just has this natural sound that's so pleasant,
Yeah.
It's not quite as colored as like a Coles, where I feel like when I record with those, for better or for worse, it's just like really the character is pretty overwhelming.
Impenetrable.
That's a good way to describe it. But whereas this mic doesn't feel that colored to me, but it definitely feels smooth and ribbony and round, but not like so overbearingly so. So to me, it's a little more of a natural sound is the way I would describe the mic, Yeah. I really want to do some like acoustic guitar and vocal with it. I haven't really had that come
I'm
up.
looking forward to doing some of that stuff too. Now, I have a Coles. It was actually one of the first mics I ever bought. And, one thing about the Coles 4038, I think I'm saying that right? The ribbon is very sensitive. So they're fragile,
Yes.
And they have a tendency to get damaged pretty easily. So you have to be very, very careful about moving around. And now mine sort of sits in a box. And I'm like, nobody's allowed to use it except me. And then I'm like, but you need to remember to use it.
Yeah. They're really heavy. I think that part of the problem is they fall a lot, because if you don't put it on a really, really heavy duty stand, I feel like people don't realize how easy it is to tip over a Coles.
Yeah. And the magnet is so strong. If it's near anything else, it goes, and it just like sticks to the other.
Oh yeah, it totally tries to stick to other metal objects. I actually, what was I going to say? Oh, I had a horn player who was in here knocked over my Coles a couple months ago. One of my Coles.
Oh, nice. So he bought you a new pair?
No, so I was like, oh man, I was kind of irritated in the moment, and it was on a big heavy stand, and he just like whacked it. He was really nervous, and it fell. And I was like, oh, geez. And I went downstairs and it was fine.
Nice. And you listen to it, you're like, hey, it's never sounded this good before.
Well, it sounded the same, So Anyway, that is at least maybe make you feel a little more reassured about pulling it out of the box every once in a while and not worrying too much about it.
That's cool. I just got some new ribbons in the studio, which I'm very excited about. They actually came to my attention from Tyler, who's a fan of the show actually, and has a new company called Alder Audio. And so I've got the H44S pair of those that I been recording on drums, and they sound great. God, they sound so they solved all my problems. Like, I mean, I love using condensers on overheads for drums, but there are those times when the cymbals are really active and stuff where you're just like, oh man, this is tearing my head off, and I'm having EQ, and I was excited about trying ribbons instead, and it's like it solved all of it, you know. Now I'm almost like brightening up the overheads instead of trying to turn down all that high end.
I have an SM69, which is a condenser, and then I have the R88, and I kind of look at whether the cymbals are bright or dark, and then decide the mic is going to be the opposite.
Yeah.
That's kind of one of the ways that I look at it.
That's a really good reminder. And I don't remember whether that was you and I talking about that in the past, but this idea of opposite thinking in recording, it's like, you know, we've got all these mics, and sometimes you can be like, well, why do I need all these different kind of mics? Like, don't I need just one mic? And a good way to think of it is, if you have a mic that's bright, put that on an instrument that's dark. If you have a mic that's dark, put that on an instrument that's bright. So it's this opposite thinking.
Yeah. Well, have you read that book, Mixing with Your Mind?
No, but I'm reading it in my mind right now.
It's a great book. It's a really weird, the guy's really quirky, interesting character, and the way that he writes about recording is very abstract in a lot of ways.
Yeah, yeah.
But one of the things that he has was very interesting to me is he talks about this hardness scale when it comes to microphones. And I think he described as like, what was the soft mic was like the U47, like the Tube 47 was like on the soft end of things. And then like, you know, the 57 and those kind of mics are like harder, and like an 87 is like somewhere in between. And he several times in the course of the book references this like hardness, and how he will take a source and then have an opposite hardness of mic. So if he determines the source like a triangle or something that's hard sounding, or cymbals, and, you know, he's going to use a soft mic. Whereas if it's a, you know, soft sound, he's going to use a harder sounding mic.
And he learned that in the Kama Sutra?
I don't know. His name's Stavro, I think is his last name. He kind of came up under George Martin, and
that's cool though. I like that kind of thinking. I mean, again, science. Like, do we really need science all the time when we're doing this stuff? This is art. So you just need a way to have a dialogue around it all, and a way to make decisions about what you want to do next, because the rest of it is artistic, you know?
Right. It's frame of mind. And I think people tend to downplay that when they think about what's important in the process. We tend to think about easy ways out, like, you know, gear, or, you know, oh, if I only had a better this or that or whatever. But honestly, like, most of the time for me, if it's not working, it's just because I don't have the right approach. You know, I'm not in the right state of mind. And that can just change things more than anything, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, well, thank you for being with us this morning and being in a great state of mind, man. We appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on.
What about headphones? Now, you're recording a lot of musicians playing together, so I'm going to go out on a limb here and say you must have a lot to say about headphone mixes and what people hear when they're playing and all that kind of stuff. Would you like to share any of your insights?
Sure. Well, I think that the key to people performing well while in headphones is a great mix in the headphones. I'm also a proponent of people hearing the same thing while they're playing together. I guess there is a way that if somebody desperately needs their own headphone mix, I can wire it up here. But I usually don't. I usually get people in here and get them in headphones, and they all have the same mix. And
same mix as you, or same mix as each other?
Everybody has the same mix. Now I do have a way that like if they're listening to like a click track or something really annoying that I can give it to them and not give it to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the balance between the instruments, I want everybody hearing the same balance because I want us all talking about the same thing. And I want the players playing dynamically based on a similar reference point because the dynamics of the playing gets a lot better when everybody's hearing the same thing.
Yeah. Otherwise, the bass player's responding to the banjo and the drummer's responding to the marxophone.
Well, yeah. I mean, how many times have you put a performer's headphones on and just been like, what? That's what they're listening to? You know? Yeah. I mean, countless times I'll go just put the headphones on, you know, in studios where they have separate mixes. And I'm just like, oh my goodness gracious. No. I mean, for me as an engineer or producer, I always want to just be hearing the same thing as they are. And I think they should be hearing what I think it should sound like, you know, because we're working together to get this sound, right? So I'm presenting them with the sound, you know, and yeah, if they need a little more themselves, I mean, I'm not saying that the thing is like, oh, it's my way or the highway. I'm just saying that we all agree on something.
Right.
And then that's what we do. And if something needs to get adjusted, is everybody cool with that? Yeah, usually people are cool with it. The key is having really good sound there in the first place.
Yeah.
Because if it sounds high fidelity and the mix is good in their headphones, people don't even say anything about it. I mean, I did a couple live session things here recently, and it's like nobody even said anything about the headphones. I had just set them up. I went down, I got the levels where I thought they should be, and they were hearing what I was hearing, and I'm pretty picky about what I hear, and it sounded good. And I have a system where the headphones are good headphones, and they're fed by a good amp, and it comes straight off the console, so it's a high.
Oh, so you have more of like that. Do you call that a passive headphone system? I guess
it's not passive. No, it's a Rane. It's just like a Rane HC6 that I had.
But it's an amp that feeds all the headphones.
Correct.
And each box is a passive box.
Correct.
So I used to work in studios like that in Nashville. It was more of an old school approach, but I rarely see that anymore. So tell us how that works.
I mean, it's just easy. I just, you know, most of the time it's like if I get them good sound, they hear it well. And
I'm sorry. I'm asking the dumb question. Like, how do we even plug that in? I've got this amp. I've got
no. So like my headphone, I have a 6-channel, 2 6-channel headphone amps. So I have 12 headphone amps, and 6 of them go down are just in a snake that goes down onto the floor where the main space is. And so the mic snake and the headphone snake, they go through the same thing. You know, there's headphone outputs on the snake down on the stage that are fed from.
Oh, I see. So the volume, so it's like it's like buying a multi-headphone box for the rack, but your volume is up in the control room and you're controlling it for their headphones down there?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. All right.
But I can plug into any of their channels at any time and hear, you know, where it's at, because there's outputs on the back and the front.
Yeah, so that's interesting because I have something similar in my studio. I have the Behringer one that has 4 different headphone channels on it, and the back can send it to the musician. I can plug mine into the front and do the blending mixing knob. But rarely is it ever close enough to the musician out in the tracking room that they can actually reach over and adjust their headphones. Usually we have to go out and help them do that anyway. And it occurs to me that it would have made more sense for me to have it in the control room, whereas the engineer, I can plug in, check their mix, adjust their headphone volume, and they can tell me if it's good or bad without having to run out to the other room. I wish I had thought of that. And then like if I am recording myself and I'm like, oh man, I wish I had a headphone volume with me. A lot of times I'm taking a laptop out to where the microphone is anyway, and I could probably just bring the levels up and down, you know, controlling Pro Tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's a simple thing for me. That's how I want to keep it, kind of is how I look at it. And I've just had a lot of experience with like kind of the same band doing it both ways, where it's just, they play so much better together when they're on the same mix, you know, the takes come faster and the feel is better. And, you know, I don't know. So it's just something that I gravitated towards, and people generally aren't too fussed. Every once in a while, somebody's real fussy about it, and you got to kind of figure out a workaround, but that's...
But that's clever. So if you have a snake or a stage box that has mic line inputs, which can go out to the floor and then run up to your control room where you plug that into gear or plug it into a patch bay or whatever. But also the stage box might have like 4 different headphone,
right,
like an ABCD.
Mine has 8
stereo
so
quarter-inch.
My snake is 24 mic lines and 8 headphone returns.
Okay. And did you custom build those, or was that just like you were able to buy a pre-made snake that just happened to...
I had some company in Nashville do it, and I can't remember who it was, but they did a great job. It's a really nice snake. But I needed to be kind of a custom length. Right. And I needed and at the time it was really hard to get snakes. Like October 2020 was a tough time to find an audio snake in this world. So I had it custom made, and
good time to find a new studio in the Hobbit Shire, though.
Yeah, it worked out. I'm not complaining, that's for sure.
So I'll conclude the headphone cue thing as just saying what I was referring to, remembering, was the very old school technique where you actually have like a rack, like an amp rack that would run to a pair of speakers, but instead of running to speakers, it runs out lines to the headphones. And then they would have these passive headphone volume boxes, and you just plug your headphones in. So it's like coming out at a full amplified level out the headphone sends. And those, I remember, can sound like really, really hi-fi and very like incredibly loud too.
Yeah. I've been looking at actually getting something like that, at least maybe for the vocal booth and maybe a couple of them downstairs, because my friend let me borrow these little monoprice things, which they're not passive. They're actually active. Really, they sound really good. They're unbalanced, but it doesn't matter because you're going to be right next to it with the headphone, and it's like another level of amplification. I was thinking about getting a few of those and just putting them, like, especially in the booth, just so at least a singer can go in there and adjust his volume or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, generally I've just found that the less you can get in the way of the signal when it gets to their headphones, the better. Yeah. And just give them, I'm really a proponent of like that sound in the headphones has to be hi-fi. So it's like a lot of studios, you'll go in there and they'll have all this nice equipment, and then you'll look at the headphones that people are listening to are garbage, and it's just like, I just think that's totally backwards. I have like Shure SRH 840s and 940s, and they're hi-fi, really full range headphones, and people love them. I mean, people always are commenting like, man, the headphones sound so good here. And I'm like, yeah, that's a really important part. Like, to me, more than having the expensive whatever mic A or thing B, it's like they can't hear themselves really well. It doesn't matter.
No, I think that's great advice. And when you have the experience of being a musician out there yourself, then you really begin to get it, because all you have to do is just hear yourself coming through the headphones sounding funny or sounding great, and it's obvious right away.
Yeah, and I play a lot on the albums that I work on too. So again, it's like I'm listening to it all day long. I want it to sound good, and I want them to hear the same thing I hear, so that when they're saying, hey, this isn't working or this whatever, that we're referencing the same thing. If somebody's listening to some crazy mix while they're tracking down there, they might be hearing something that's not working, but in the context of the way it really should be balanced, it's fine, And so you just have to kind of work with people on that. And I try to like de-emphasize it. I try to just not talk about it until somebody wants to start talking about it, and just sort of let them be as transparent as they possibly can until like not have people thinking about it too much.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I used to find myself reminding interns all the time. It's like, don't start by telling them how they can have custom stuff in their headphones. Wait until somebody's asking for something. Yeah. We're trying to solve a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't fish around for too much from them until something seems like it's not right, I just go about it and try to get the best sound. And yeah, that's good advice. That's something an intern would definitely mess up.
So you just finished an awesome mix and sent it off to the band, but the singer texts you with lyric changes, the drummer emails you wanting a different fill, and the bass player DMs you on Instagram about a wrong note in the chorus. But which mix version are they talking about anyway? Don't you wish there was an easier way? Samply.app comes to the rescue as your ultimate mix assistant, streaming high-quality mixes so your clients can easily listen and send notes from their mobile phone on the road or a computer back in the studio. All mix comments are time-stamped directly onto the correct mix version with no confusion, and everything is easy to find in one location. No more mixed-up mix messages from the band. It's file sharing that was specifically built for music, and it all works in your browser with no downloads required. Sign up for your free account with 2 projects now at samply.app and use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you're ready to upgrade. Have you ever wished you could remove the click track bleed from a singer's vocal mic, the sound of shuffling feet from a full choir, or clicking noises from the valves of an otherwise brilliant trumpet solo? These are just some of the incredible things I've been able to clean up, edit, or remove from a recording using the magic of iZotope RX. Great for mixing with a collection of plugins for your DAW to manage plosives, clicks, S's, noise, buzz, reverb, breaths, and even guitar fret squeaks with a set it and forget it simplicity that lets you focus on your creativity in the studio while you let iZotope handle the audio challenges. If you've ever wanted to truly feel like a magician in the studio, then iZotope RX is your magic wand. Try out the subscription option with an extended 30-day free trial at iZotope.com/rockstars or use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session, the second half, aka the second half of the show. My guest today is Anthony Gravino, joining us from High Cross Sound, his new studio in Champaign-Urbana, Illinois. Anthony, are you ready to jam, dude?
I'm always ready to jam.
Where does the name High Cross Sound come from?
Well, it's on High Cross Road. And
all right.
So that's the last studio was called The Drake, and it was on Drake Avenue. And when I got here, I was like, well, what am I going to call it? And I thought, well, I'll name it after the street. It had a nice ring to it. It was kind of like a tip of the cap to Sunset Sound, High Cross Sound, I guess. So anyway, names are tough. Band names, studio names, they're tough.
They are. I live on Brasher Street, and I called my band. I was like, what am I going to call this band for a show I was doing? And I called it the Brasher Band because it was all my neighbors playing with me too.
I think the more flippant you are about a name, the better.
Yeah. You recently have done a pretty dang cool, I'm being very, very safe for work today for some reason, a pretty dang cool record, which got a Grammy nomination. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I did a record with Kurt Elling and Charlie Hunter, and also these 2 other guys who I wasn't part of the process that they were involved in. Corey Faunville and DJ Harrison, great musicians. And we did the record, I started it a year ago today. And it was really fun. I did all the vocals and overdubs here and then mixed it. And, the record came out and people seemed to be responding well to it. And then it got nominated for a Grammy for Best Jazz Vocal. So whatever that means, it's always
nice.
It's fun to have.
And Kurt Elling is the vocalist.
Yeah, Kurt Elling is sort of a legendary jazz vocalist. Although it's not really a jazz record. It's more like an R&B funky record, soul record. But he's well known as a jazz singer. He's had a long career. He's won a couple Grammys before. And Charlie Hunter is an amazing. He plays this hybrid guitar where he's the bass player and the guitar player at the same time.
Yeah.
It's amazing. He's an amazing guy. Those guys are both really amazing people. They work super hard. They're really fun and intense at the same time, if you know what I mean. And I really enjoyed it. I mean, I just learned a lot from them. And they let me take a lot of chances. And Charlie, you know, right when we started the record, he called me up before he even got here. And he's like, hey, you know, I want you to really like take chances and, you know, we'll get weird sounds. And, you know, this isn't going to be a jazz record and this is going to be a dirty record and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's great. Man, that's the phone call I wanted to get from you, you know? So we hit it off pretty well right off the bat when it came to, I think we had a similar idea of how we wanted this whole thing to sound.
Yeah.
And I just, you know, it was a great experience. And I like the way the record came out and I'm proud of it.
So I saw Charlie come play a show at a local club here, a place called the Family Wash, where it used to be in East Nashville many years ago. And I was really excited when I heard that he was coming. And I absolutely was like, I'm definitely going to be there because I'm a long time fan of jazz. And I so rarely get to go out and see it now. And it was Charlie playing with a drummer, and it was just the two of them. And it was so badass. It was so good. I was just like mesmerized by their playing style. And, you know, the drummer was putting all this cool, like junky stuff on the snare and getting really creative with the sounds. And Charlie was just doing this great combination of the bass and the guitar at the same time. And I don't think it's like, he doesn't play like John Scofield, but it reminds me of that kind of, you know, totally fearless, creative approach towards the sound of the guitar and what it means for jazz. And also it probably shows my limited palette of being able to describe other jazz guitar players.
Well, it's pretty hard to compare him to anybody else because what he does is so unique.
Yeah.
And I mean, from a standpoint of just some of the things he does, I mean, we re-recorded a few guitar things that they had originally recorded on the basic tracks that he wanted to kind of redo. And just watching him do that where he's playing bass and he's comping guitar at the same time, just the mental gymnastics that somebody has to go through to do that is amazing. I mean, he told me...
How is he doing it? Is it one of those things where the left hand is doing the bass notes and the right hand is...
No. Yeah. It's his thumb is the bass player. And his other thumb is, his left-hand thumb is often fretting the bass notes, depending on what he's doing.
Right.
But his right thumb is always the bass player. And then his other fingers are the guitar player. And the instrument is set up so that the two things are pretty well isolated from each other on two different outputs. Like I had two tracks and one would be bass and one would be a guitar, and there would be very little, you know, bleed from one to the other.
And they were going through amps or they were direct?
I think I had both. I think I had the option of both. The other was, I can't remember. I used different combinations at different times, I'm sure. But yeah, there was like a DI on each one and then an amp on each one. But they were separated. Like,
yeah, how would you think about, so like immediately the engineer in me starts to get a headache and I'm like, oh, should I put the bass in the middle and should I make the guitar in the middle or should I make the guitar stereo somehow or pan it?
Neither.
What were some thoughts that came to mind for you?
The bass needed to be in the middle because it was the low end and
because it's the bass.
Needed to go with the kick. They needed to be married.
Oh, so you did have drums on this? Okay,
yeah. It's the instrumentation of it is Charlie's hybrid guitar with keys and drums and Kurt over the top.
Right. Oh, you mentioned there were two other players.
Yeah. So there's a lot of it's Wurlitzer and there's organ and some other weird keyboard stuff. And Charlie did a few keyboard overdubs here that were really fun. So yeah, and then the guitar, what I did was I would pan the guitar, I think mostly to the left on those mixes. And the Wurlitzer organ would usually kind of be on the right. And the bass and the drums were mono. There were like 12 tracks of drums, no close tom mics. And I used 3 of them in the whole mix for every song.
Wow. Did you use your R88 on the drums?
I didn't record the drums. So
okay.
They recorded the basic tracks, the drums and Charlie and the keys. And then I got that in a very raw form. And then I had to edit those kind of jams. Some of them were, and some of them were a little more put together, but some of them were just jams that Kurt had written stuff to, but that needed to be edited so they fit the arrangement. So I got them and had to do all these edits to put them together that they wanted and then start to work on a sound because it didn't didn't really sound like much. It was pretty, cut reel, just kind of flat and clean. And so I worked on it for like a day doing the edits and just trying to pull together a general sound of what the record would sort of sound like, so that when Kurt was doing his vocals, it would be exciting sounding,
Yeah.
And then they came and we just kind of crafted it from there. I mean, most of those original, I did, all the bass got run back out onto the tape machine and back in. We printed every bass track to tape and through compression and EQ and then back in. Cause
Oh, cool.
I was going, the record has a kind of, I was thinking about like soul coughing was sort of my my reference for, I didn't want to be.
Here comes Chad Blake twice in one interview.
Well, yeah, just like not quite as, I mean, he didn't do all their records though. Some of their earlier records sound cool like that too, and it's not him.
Okay.
But they have this just like intensity between the bass and the drums, and there's just all this stuff kind of like boiling up in the drums and all this like weird compression stuff happening. I kind of wanted it to feel like that, and
well, plus that's you, because is Chicago is not Chicago, right?
Yeah. So anyway, we did a lot of messing with the original sounds to get it to have the sound that it had, and then a lot of overdubbing of vocals and percussion and some keyboards and some guitars and stuff. So it was a fun process. But I had to keep bouncing back and forth because I was literally, mixing. We'd finished recording vocals on a song, and they want me to mix it, and then they'd want to record more vocals like 4 hours later, after Kurt could write for a while. So the whole thing was 14 days, and we recorded all the vocals and mixed the whole album in that time. And it was sort of not one chunk of time doing one thing, and it was just back and forth. So that was kind of hair raising at the time, but I actually think it was good because we weren't too dear about it,
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like we signed off on stuff and it was cool, and I'd print like an instrumental, and then if we needed to go back and redo something about the vocals, I could have the instrumental and just kind of fuss with the vocals over. But we didn't go back that much, and once we signed off on the mixes, they were just kind of done,
Yeah. Well, the interesting about working with jazz musicians, in my experience, is you can find them doing a performance and then they're unhappy with it, and you're sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, that was incredible! That was so badass!" And then at the same time, they can be happy with something in a moment because it represents something to them in terms of the honesty or legitimacy of a performance, and that can be striking as well, in a cool way.
Yeah, I mean, they were all about a vibe, They weren't, perfection was not the goal. The goal was attitude and sassiness and vibe and groove, and whatever we can do to accentuate the groove with the sonics and with the, that was at the forefront of everything. And so we worked really hard to try to, make it have that groove. And then the soul coughing records were kind of because they do that, they have that, like that intensity to them. And yeah, overall, I mean, it's been great to work with them. I hope I get to work with them again, and they're wonderful people.
Right on. Yeah. Well, so when I saw Charlie play here at that show, his personality was striking too. I mean, he just had this cool, casual, like a little bit lackadaisical style and look to him. And when he played the show, and he sort of, sat down with his amp, and he kind of struck me like he sort of looked like he just walked in off a construction site, and he was just like, I'm just going to play now. And it was great,
Oh yeah. He's a completely not pretentious person.
Yeah. I mean, it's like wearing like construction boots or something,
No, he wore, I think he had 2 outfits. He was here for 2 weeks. I think he wore the same 2 outfits, which I just
rock
loved.
and roll.
Yeah, it was great.
Jazz and roll.
He's just such a true, first of all, he's incredibly intelligent. I mean, he's just a total intellectual. Like you can talk to him about anything, and he's been all around the world 25 times.
Wow.
And so it's like he just has all this experience and these amazing stories of, and it's not like he's one of those guys that's like trying to tell you all his stories, but he's just, he's really fun to be around. He's just such a smart, talented person. You just don't meet people like that often in this world. And he's a special, special guy, real gem. I mean, I felt like totally comfortable working with him from the second we started till the second we ended. It was just cool and fun. And
is he a Chicago cat?
No, he's originally from Berkeley, California.
Oh, cool.
And then he moved to New York, I want to say in the late 80s, maybe.
Jazz musicians have a tendency to do that.
He's not really a jazz. I wouldn't call him a jazz musician. He's just like a world musician. He's way beyond like, most of what I hear him do isn't strike me as jazz. It's more like funky R&B, but just with this really wide vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's got this huge musical vocabulary that is just, it's awesome to be around, you know, but he doesn't use it for evil, you know, and he's not all about talking about technical things. He's all about talking about emotional quality and, you know, groove and stuff like that. So he's kind of the best of both worlds, really. I mean, I just had a great time with him. That's
great.
Wonderful to be around.
OWC now brings you the Mini Stack STX, the world's first Thunderbolt 4 certified storage and hub expander, perfectly sized to stack with the Mac Mini, and the ideal storage and connectivity companion for Thunderbolt or USB-equipped computers and devices. With a SATA HDD SSD bay and NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot, you can expand your Mini's storage capacity to gigantic proportions. 3 Thunderbolt USB-C ports enable you to connect to millions of Thunderbolt, USB, and future USB 4 drives, displays, AV mixers, cameras, and tablets, as well as desktop accessories like a keyboard, card reader, or mouse. I'm using the Mini Stack STX paired with my Mac Mini M1 to house my dedicated audio SSD and sample libraries at my studio, and it works great. Find the new Mini Stack STX and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. The STX 100D from the Spectra 1964 Custom Shop is the big brother to the now famous STX 100, a fully discrete mic pre with dual transformer isolated Spectra 101 amplifiers. The STX 100D is exactly the same original circuit found in Stax, Ardent, Advision, A&M, and Record Plant recording consoles. The sonic performance is identical. Best of all, it will plug into a single space of your standard 500 lunchbox. And if you want to add the sound of the famous Spectra C610 complementer, then check out the new STX 600 modules, combining the STX 100 mic pre and C610 into a single 500 module. Now you can get the same incredible sound in your studio that worked for famous producers like Tom Dowd with the STX mic pre's BBDI and complementers. Go to Spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. So you said you took the bass part and you sort of sent it to tape and back. Talk a little bit about what tape does. So for the rock stars who hear about tape and they don't have a lot of experience with it, what does it feel like to you when you put something on tape and hear it back? What are some of the, if you want to get science about it, you can, or if you just want to talk about the artistic aspect.
Well, there's a lot of different ways you can use it, and it can sound really different depending on how you hit it. So with the bass, I wanted to add distortion and compression and goo, I wanted it to just feel more alive than it did. It felt a little sort of just like direct, So I was hitting the tape pretty hard and trying to get saturation out of it, It can sound clean too, to a certain, very clean. My tape machine, if you don't hit it hard, it's very clean. But it still has a sound that is subtle, and sometimes desirable and sometimes not. Now, the other way I used the machine on that record was I would do slap delay on the vocal. So that I love to do because you can just crank the input and like distort the slap vocal. And it does this thing where it's just like it sits in the track so nicely. It's like all squashed down and perfect. And you can just set it in there at the right level. And somehow I can't get the same feeling out of a slap vocal plugin that I can when I plow into the tape machine and use the vari speed to get it just where I want it. And it just has a unique sound to me. I don't use it all the time, but if I'm deep in a mix and I need, a good slap and I want it to be a little bit gritty, there's nothing like what the tape machine can do when you
that's great.
but you gotta slam it, I mean, to get that sound out of it.
I think now I'm already missing my tape machine, but not really. I just didn't have space for it. So regardless of how much I would love it, I had to make an ergonomic decision.
Yeah, they're fun. They're not super practical a lot of the time, and
they're super fun. Let's reiterate. Fun.
Yeah, they're super fun. They're not like that, as some people I think overestimate how impractical they can be, but they're also kind of a pain in the ass sometimes. But I love it. I just like having the 2-track around for, that kind of stuff and to mix to occasionally when the project sounds good that way.
Yeah.
But I'm always evaluating. I don't just assume like, oh, the tape's going to sound better, because sometimes it doesn't. And a lot, it's like 50-50 almost at this point with the way digital sounds.
Well, a couple of the things that I do remember from tape, it creates, I guess it's the bass bump, but that's almost bringing in too much science. It's like, who cares what it is? There's a quality to the low end that happens when you do the tape thing that just reminds me of why I like to turn the speakers up on an old dub record.
Yes.
It's just a big, fat, round low end that doesn't seem to have all those problems that, I don't have to reach for the low cut in the same kind of way that I do on a all digital low end thing.
Totally. I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. A friend of mine was mixing a record. He was kind of struggling with the low end of it. And he kind of is he's mixing in the box now, and he hadn't been, most of his experiences with like tape and older school recording back in the day. And I was like, man, you got to remember, like the tape like took all that like 30 hertz and below and sort of rolled it off, like the digital just lets all that stuff through. So, there's like a lot of cleaning up in the sub frequency. If somebody has not tracked something with high pass filters and stuff, there's going to be a lot of buildup down there, and I think it was like, he's like, oh yeah, you're right. Totally. But just like tape kind of took care of some of that mud for you while at the same time enhancing the low end, and that's sort of the magic of it to me, is the way that it handles like the relationship between the bass drum and the bass. When you put it on tape, it just 9 times out of 10, that relationship improves. You know what I mean? It can
soften a kick drum.
It just makes them feel more together to me. You know what I mean? Somehow it's subtle, but it feels more like those two things are actually together. And then when I go back and listen to the digital, they feel just slightly more disparate. But you lose some stuff too. The frequency response is not the same in the high end.
Right.
And sometimes that's good too.
And what speed of tape?
I usually do 15.
Right. So that's an important consideration, Rockstars.
Yeah, 15.
7.5, 15, 30 are the 3 most typical. If you've got a 3, what is it?
3 and 3/4.
3 and 3/4. Yeah. If you've got that speed, that's cassette speed, which is badass. And it can sound really cool too.
Yeah. I have a cassette deck too that I sometimes use for real extreme destruction of things.
Yeah, I have one too, and I'm not using it enough. So I need to remember. I just don't often, I'm not always getting an opportunity to go freak out a sound and mess with it too.
Yeah, me neither. I mean, but when I do, I take it.
Yeah. But so Rockstars, if you're at 30 IPS, which is inches per second on tape, that's a higher speed. It also meant that your reel of tape was only half as long time-wise.
16 minutes.
Yeah, 16 minutes. But you get more high end, and there's still a bass bump, which has to do with the tape head, mechanics of the tape head. But the bass bump moves up a little bit in frequency, I think, if I'm remembering that right.
And it's less pronounced.
And it's less pronounced.
I feel like it usually is less.
And then at 15 IPS, you get a bigger, fatter bass bump down there. But it's also, again, as Anthony's reminding us, it rolls off the very, very low ends. So it's like they're just kind of not there to be a problem in the same kind of way that they are for digital. But you lose some of the very upper highs, and you get a little bit of almost like a mid bump too, or something.
Yeah, it kind of depends on how you set the machine up too. But generally, I'm trying to get mine as flat as possible, and then just work with the color that it does like that when I'm mixing to it.
Yeah.
The one other difference between 30 and 15 is that 30 is quieter. There's less hiss. It's 3 dB less hiss, which I don't care about, because if I'm mixing to tape and it hasn't been recorded to tape, it's going to be pretty quiet. And I'm going to be able to
because you're printing a significant amount of signal.
Yeah, and I'm going to be able to dial it in to hit it exactly how I want to. So I don't really worry about the noise of the. In fact, man, on a lot of records, especially jazz music, that little bit of hiss is so valuable.
Nice.
I can't even tell you how much. And you know what? Next time, if you're ever working on a jazz record and you just put on like Kind of Blue or something from that era and listen to the hiss. And
just turn your speakers up.
Just listen to the hiss that's going on. It's super obvious. And like, if you stripped that away, you would have a very different sounding recording. And I think that it's just, whenever you have that music where it's like there's that acoustic sound and then all that space, right? It's like there's something unnatural about that to our ears when all that space doesn't have some sort of din of like what we would perceive as like the noise in a room, like the noise floor of a room. And the hiss kind of just like puts that in there. It's almost like sparkly air around stuff. Like in the real quiet sections, when things come down, there's this little hiss there, and it just like makes it never go to like complete silence. And somehow that is an effective illusion, I think, to our ears of like space and reality.
Well, especially when we're talking about digital. So Rockstars, whether you know this or not, digital doesn't work without noise. So in order for digital to work, there is intentional noise added way down in the noise floor called dither. Anybody correct me if I'm wrong about this now. Maybe things have evolved differently, but you need to have a certain kind of a noise floor for all those little bits to kind of smooth together into something that to our ear sounds like, we're fooled into thinking that this is a continuous sound, just like looking at film frames on a screen, fooling our eye into thinking it's a continuous flow of motion. And analog hiss gives you, probably a louder version of that is familiar, it's analog, it's real, and it's truly randomized as far as, its creation. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's a big part of what plays into that.
Yeah, somebody pointed that out to me a long time ago, and ever since then, I always kind of thought about it. And I try to, use it when I can. It's just like noise. Also, that's kind of one of the things that's cool about mixing on a console with a bunch of outboard gear is you get this noise floor, that's pretty low, but it's a lot more than nothing, which is what your digital mix bus has, right? And there's something about having that there too, or like just like the EMT is just sort of sitting there, with its noise floor, and then maybe this compressor adds a little noise, and over all the channels you get this like minus 62 or something, minus 61 noise floor, right, when you're mixing. And there's something about that too, that it's even just that little bit, like when the whole thing like comes to a stop, or like there's a big stop in a song and it goes to dead silence, that ruins my illusion, right? Mm-hmm. Having some of that noise floor there, I know like we've spent our whole lives like trying to eliminate hiss and noise and stuff, but it's sort of like there's a point of diminishing returns with it, where it starts to sound weird and clinical and not real.
Yeah. I think about electronic music and how, totally dead silence could be a part of that. But I'm also wondering, after I just made the comment about dither, whether we ever really do get totally dead silence. We might not. And another reminder too is you talk about the noise in the analog gear and the console being part of it. And I just want to remind us, how many times have you done a totally in the box mix and used like plugins that had little noise generators in them? And by the time you go to print the mix, you're like, wait a minute, what is that at the beginning of this mix? And you realize that you had some plugin cranked up, and like the noise is like way louder than you were ever going to allow yourself in the analog world. And you have to like go turn off the little noise switches in all your plugins.
Yes.
or some of them, you know.
I've experienced that several times with there's like an Altec kind of a modeler, I think that Sound Toys does.
Yeah,
It defaults to the noise on, you know?
Yeah.
And if you put like 5 of them on it, all of a sudden your noise floor is shot.
Yeah, I've almost gotten burned where I was like on my way to mastering and I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize this mess was in the beginning of the song.
Yeah, I try to turn those off on every plugin every chance I can get because it somehow, something about it doesn't work the same to me.
Doesn't jive with you.
Yeah, that's kind of an annoying feature, I think. But I guess if you can figure out a way to use it creatively, it could be useful.
Yeah. Tell us some other things about Pro Tools that you really do love a lot. Like, so you've got a great console, you got some wonderful analog gear, but you're also integrating with Pro Tools. What are some things that you're excited about inside the computer right now?
Well, you know, there's some plugins that sound really good that are just really useful tools that it would be really hard for me to work without at this point just because of the things they do.
Like Deverb.
Not so much Deverb, but no, like the Pro Q3 or the Sound Toys stuff, you know, just for all those weird little, I need a flange on this, or I need a phaser on this, or I need a, you know, those plugins are so good at just like getting those sounds and really good versions of those sounds into your
Are
mix.
you using the Eventide stuff?
I have not tried that, but boy, have I been tempted
good,
to check out that.
I'm telling you, the instant flanger and instant phaser blow me away.
Yeah, okay, now you're just like making me think about buying it.
Yeah, you definitely, I recommend it.
But yeah, you know, like those kind of things, obviously I lean on those certain plugins quite a bit. And I just love it because it's easy and it sounds better than ever now. I feel like it sounds really good. It's much less buggy than it used to be. At least the system I have now is incredibly stable. I've been running.
Yeah, what's your new thing?
Well, I have a 2000, you know, a couple-year-old Mac Mini, and
the M1, the new
not
Silicon?
the M1, no,
Okay,
the previous to that. But it's got 64 gig of RAM in it, and I've had it for almost 2 years. It is, I'm going to probably jinx myself, but it has never dropped out one time in recording.
Okay, so why 64 gigs of RAM? Is there something about your process that you're glad you've got this big RAM headroom for?
Well, yeah, mostly because back to headphones, but it's so important. Like the latency thing, you know, in the headphones is a big deal to me. And I wanted to be able to, I'm not running an HD system and I want to be able to provide super low latency monitoring. And so I can
But is that related to the RAM though? I thought the RAM,
well, the RAM is what
affect that.
The RAM is what the
Should
buffer.
be the speed, right?
No, the buffer though, the hardware buffer that you set in Pro Tools, whatever I set mine at 32 is the lowest it'll let me do it.
Yeah.
That is directly taxing the RAM. So you have to have a lot of RAM to set that buffer low.
Okay. All right. I might have to look at that again, but moving on from that. So then the other thing that RAM is good for is, you know, the storage in memory for sample, you know, players. So virtual instruments and things like that. If you want to load up things that are big sample heavy, like if you have a very intensive fart machine.
Yes. The intense fart machine takes a lot of RAM. Yeah. All those virtual instruments, which I don't, actually, it's funny. I actually have an external, a different computer that I use for virtual instruments. That's just like I use as like a standalone that's not inside of Pro Tools because I don't want that stuff running in there as much as possible. I just want to treat it like a multi-track machine. So I don't really run any of those. But I just wanted to be able to, you know, do like, you know, 32 tracks at 96K and not have it choke.
Well, it does not hurt to have a lot of RAM. We might have to agree to disagree on RAM versus speed and which one affects which, but regardless of that, it kind of doesn't matter. If you got 64 gigs of RAM in there and the speed, I guess probably too much to ask if you remember what speed it is. It probably doesn't even matter because whichever one, you know, a few-year-old Mac Mini is going to have a high speed anyway. It's working. That's the
well, the thing, you know, I had some friends who had used the same model with the same configuration.
That's so critical. You know, we don't always get that chance to do that, but there's all this promise of things. And then in the end, you're like, I just want to see this system working in somebody's studio. Great. I'm sold, you know?
Exactly. That's why I went over to my buddy's studio. He had one running. He was like, dude, he's like, I can throw up a mix with like 500 plugins on it with 90 tracks and it doesn't even like look at me funny.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, cool. That sounds good. And so I bought one and it has been the most rock solid rig I've ever had. So
then how do you get, what's your interface situation?
I have an Antelope Orion 32 Plus, which goes Thunderbolt into the computer. Okay. And then I have a Crane Song Head 2-channel AD and DA that's like the master clock. And I print my mixes through it, use it for mastering the DA.
So that's pretty cool. So with this, if I remember, is the Antelope Orion, is that like a single rack space unit?
Yeah.
No?
Yep. 32 IO.
That's pretty amazing. You get 32 D sub inputs and outputs from a single space rack like that.
It's great. I mean, you know, I know a lot of people have said they've had problems with the Antelope stuff. For me, it has been like so good I don't even think about it.
Do you want to record killer drums in your home studio? Rockstars of Drums will show you how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with examples from a Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Do you want to know how to master your own music at home? Rockstars of Mastering will show you how with plugins in your DAW so that your music will sound awesome when you finish your mixes. And if you're looking for a step-by-step solution for a pro-sounding mix that won't take years to learn, the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass with Craig Alvin will show you a proven method for creating Grammy-winning quality mixes that you can apply in your home studio right now. Or if you just need to learn the fundamentals of creating a great sounding mix, then register for my free course Mixmaster Bundle to get great mixes using simple free plugins. And get started now making your best record ever at recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy. Use the code ROCKSTAR at checkout to get 10% off any course for a limited time. Have you explored a lot of interface options and how they sound? One sounds different from the other, or have you found that, you know, I mean, I know your records sound great, so we can be done talking about interfaces.
Well, no, actually not. I'm actually kind of considering changing sometime soon.
Change is fun.
Well, here's the thing. I have gotten real deep down the hole of the whole converter interface thing in the past. Mm-hmm. And my conclusion was, and still is to this day, that the best sounding digital rig I ever had was my radar. I had an IZ, nice. A 2496 radar that I had ADAT'd up to an RME card, and that fed Pro Tools. So my converters were all going through this radar. And that sound, like, I have not heard any other thing that I think sounds as good as that. And I've heard a lot of them. Wow. And I keep going back to that. And I have an opportunity to actually buy back my old radar for a very reasonable price.
And what was it? 24-bit 48K or something like that?
It was a Nyquist 2496. So
2496.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And it's 24 channels. But what I'm thinking about doing is now IZ has come out with these converter boxes that you can put the cards from the radars in, but they're a Dante converter, like, you know, it's a Dante interface.
Okay.
And so
that gives you a lot of...
It would allow me to have 32 channels of radar converters, which is always kind of my dream. The reason that I got rid of the radar is because I needed more I/O.
And it was limited at 24.
Well, it's 24 and it's 24 total. So that's 24, so 16 AD, 8 DA at one time. You know, you can't, they don't do it both ways. You pick one or the other.
Oh.
You know what I mean? So
see.
it's only 24 total converters at one time, either direction. And so you're constantly kind of flipping back and forth, and it's a little clunky like that.
Right.
But the sound of it, I just could not deny. And even when I got the new box, I compared it to the radar, and I was like, yeah, the radar sounds a little better, but I need 32 IO because of this workflow. And I was a little worried about the radar just long term in terms of it's a 20-year-old computer, you know?
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, well, I just have to move on now and just deal with it. And it's not, the Orion sounds very, very good. Well, I'm talking about, I'm splitting hairs here.
Yeah.
But for me, doing it every day and knowing the difference, I feel like it's something that I would like to have.
Yeah.
It is enough of a difference that I would like to have it. And so I'm kind of, it's very expensive, but because
Right. It'd be a higher cost and a little more work to get it to all configure and work.
Yes. I would have to get like an RME Dante interface, and it goes into that and then into the computer. But it's one rack space for 32 channels. It's the same thing. You just put the radar cards into this chassis, and I would already have the cards, which are half the battle.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking about it. I definitely kind of miss the sound of the radar. It just has this.
Radar was always known to sound a lot like tape. And
No,
Daniel,
that's not true.
Okay,
I totally dispel that myth. It doesn't sound a lot like tape. It sounds more, it feels more like an analog sound maybe than most other digital boxes that I've used, but it doesn't sound anything. I mean, it's still not tapey sounding,
Right, okay.
It's still clear digital, but it's a little bit, what I find is that there's this sort of 3-dimensional thing that happens with the soundscape, so to speak. And then just like the top end is so much more effortless on it than I'm used to with other, like for example, here's an example of how I perceive the difference in the sound of the radar converters. The things that I can do with analog equalizers and compressors when the radar is feeding them, like output DA out and then onto the console, they react different. Like I can crank EQ more and it not get harsh. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
Or like I can do more extreme things to the sounds and it still sound warm and clear and musical. And it doesn't get as just edgy. I always just hear this, I'm always fighting this slight weird edge in most
I know that feeling.
Digital situations that I'm in. And I'm telling you, man, if you haven't heard the radar, it kind of cures that to a certain extent. It just like removes that without removing the clarity or without distorting, you know what I mean? Doing any of that. But it just has this smooth, and the bottom end, I swear to God, like sometimes on certain kinds of music, if I compare it to like another converter, I can hear like this other octave opening up in the bottom end of it. That's
exciting.
Like not there in the other.
That's what happens in the total analog world for me. So for example, when I would do Bonnaroo mixes or even in my own stereo sessions mixes in my studio, and I would take mics off the floor, go straight through the console, mix it right down to stereo. There'd be all these things, limitations of that where I couldn't, get as tweaky as I could mixing in Pro Tools and doing things like that. But it would have this extended low end, like open breathing quality that always got me really excited. I would just be like, God, the low end just sounds so listenable, and the high end too,
That's how those direct to tape recordings are too. It's just like the low end is so glued because it's literally just like console, tape machine. That's it. And I just find that like, and the other the thing about the radar is if you have an actual radar, you can flip back and forth between input and then the full path through. There's just a button, input monitoring mode, right? So you can literally sit there and listen to what it sounds like before it goes through the radar and then after in real, just flip it back
which you can't do in Pro Tools.
Which you can't do in hardly any other system. And so I was able to sit there and like always hear what the signal was doing or the radar was doing to the signal. And it was just like really maintaining the integrity of it to my ears, and it just sounds the most like what's coming off the console to me.
Yeah. But if you were going to do that flipping thing, you would have to have a console in between the radar and the Pro Tools.
No, the radar has input monitoring on it to where
so it's got its own internal sort of mixer.
It's not a mixer. It's just it just toggles between the signal before it goes through the converters and the signal after it's gone through the converters.
But where are you hearing it back? Are you hearing it coming back from Pro Tools that way?
Yes, on a channel on the radar. Yes. So to do that, you are correct. You have to pull it up on a channel on the console to do that.
So you're hearing an analog signal straight to the speakers.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool,
yes. And that's how I would do it. Because the radar, it works like a tape machine. It's not a DAW. It's just a one in, one out.
So I'm going to offer something to the rock stars here, because this is a discovery that, I had to realize one day, and it can be really helpful. When we're recording digitally, we're so immersed in a world of going through converters and through the computer and back out again and we forget, that becomes our benchmark for, ground zero. And then we start manipulating the sounds within that sandbox, so to speak. But we don't necessarily realize what that source sound is because we're never getting that experience of hearing it analog straight through to the speakers. And that's what used to happen in a studio when we'd have a console and a tape machine, and you just put the tape machine in input, and it's like, there's your source sound. Now, when you play it back from tape, you're hearing a difference. You're hearing it's like mixing and having a reference mix. In the analog studio world, we would have that reference sound. And so we would know how much we were changing it. And Rockstars, if you want to experience that in your own studio, one simple way to do that is if you have like a master volume knob that goes to your speakers. So let's say you're going through interfaces and to the computer, but then you're coming back out and you've got like a volume knob that then hits your powered speakers. If you can take a microphone, do it very carefully, and don't do it if the microphone's in the same room with the speakers. But if you can take like your microphone that you're working with all the time and run it through, and you would need a separate mic preamp. But if you can go through a mic preamp and then bypass the converter and the computer and everything, and then temporarily, just for this experiment, go out of the mic preamp into that volume knob and bring up that sound through your speakers, you can get a sense of what the true starting sound is, and you can begin to get a feel for how much it changes if you go back to listening through the converters and through Pro Tools, and you can really train your ears to like what's possible. Thanks for letting me go on that long rant, Anthony.
Oh, no problem. I was enjoying what you were saying. I agree with everything. I think that people tend to underestimate how much coloration you get from the converters.
Yeah, or just how good your sound already is when you start.
Sure, yeah. And, I mean, it's just to me, it's like additive. It just kind of builds up, And then my ears have grown to be very sensitive to the tonal differences in just recording rigs because I've been to a lot of studios and work a lot on it. So it's like I know what my stuff sounds like, and I know what like a DigiDesign interface sounds like. They all have this like sound to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's mostly it's good, but there's just this kind of, sometimes the low end doesn't quite feel full to me in the way, not that it's not extended, it just doesn't sit quite right. And then sometimes there's this just like edginess to the top end that really grates on me. And I'm always trying to figure out ways to work around it. And what I've come to the conclusion to is that, like, the best you can do is get the thing that like is the closest to the way you hear it,
Yeah.
And from my experience, the radar converters have that just like, yeah, that's the sound I want, not that, and again, I don't want to like make it seem like these things are like night and day differences. The differences are fairly subtle if you just compare mix A to mix B. And what I've never really been able to do is actually compare the exact same program material, all recorded, to a radar or whatever, and then to another interface, and then all mixed back through a console, through that, and then printed back in. I've never heard that, but I suspect that the differences would become pretty clear at that point.
Well, maybe if you get the radar thing going, you can have an input mix hitting your console and summing down to a stereo output while simultaneously going to radar and Pro Tools, and then play back the Pro Tools session through that same mix on the console and print that and see if you hear the difference between the two.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to do some more. I mean, I did a bunch of A-Bing when I sold the radar and bought the Orion, and I'm going to get probably this radar back in here sometime soon. Yeah. And I definitely want to do some more listening and just make sure, it needs to be blind. You always got to not be just like knowing what you're listening to. And, I mean, I'm really insistent on that. Like if I'm going to actually evaluate gear, it's like, I can't know which one's which. I just have to go. And if I can pick, my theory is that if I can pick it every time, there's a difference that's meaningful there to me,
All right. So I'm going to offer up a couple of quick thoughts. Rockstars is a plugin. I think it's called Nugent AB. And it's a plugin that you can set up in a session if you're doing some blind listening tests, and you hit the button and it switches from one version to another, but you don't know which one it's switching to. So you can listen and you switch, and then you say, I like it or I don't like it, I think, or something like that. It's been a while since I used it, but you do that 10 or 20 times, and you can do that with a group of people. And then at the end, nobody knew which one it was playing, but it kept track for you, and it shows you which one got the most upvotes, which one got the highest number of votes. It's a really cool concept and takes a little bit of hooking up, but you can use that for, just comparing. Let me see, what was it called? Yeah, I think it's the New Gen Audio. It's a free plugin too.
That's really cool. I think it's super important to have a way to accurately, quickly A/B things.
Yeah.
In general, just like every studio, no matter what level you're at, you need to be able to quickly just compare A to B. And for a number of reasons, sometimes for just very pragmatic reasons. Is this broken?
Right. Or like, so what was the other thing I was going to say about that too? I don't remember exactly, but I was excited for a moment thinking like, hey, Rockstars, if let's tempt Anthony to invite us to an event at his cool new studio, and we'll get a chance to do things like hear mics directly through consoles, hear source audio, hear what it becomes when we record it, and stuff like that. So
that'd be fun.
If you'd enjoy that, drop a comment in to this podcast wherever you're listening to it, and let us know that you would like to do that, and we can put something together like that. I'll tempt Anthony until he is an offer he can't refuse.
If we do it in the summer, we could have a pool party.
Now we're talking, man. Now we're talking. I love it. In the Champagne of Urbanas.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I like that. The Champagne of Urbanas.
What else was I going to mention? Dang it. There was something else that was so brilliant. It was so brilliant to share.
Was it science?
Oh, I know what I was going to say is, it wasn't science this time. This is actually just people. Other radar users that I've known. I remember hearing Daniel Lenoir was really in love with his radar system. And he would, it was probably a tape op article years ago, and he would take that whole rig down to Mexico to go make records. And he also said he loved working out in the desert there, wherever he was, because the guitars sounded great because there wasn't a bunch of interference into the guitar pickups.
Oh, yeah. I saw that too. I remember reading that or something. Yeah. That makes sense, though. If you think about it, there's not a lot of current field around,
Yeah. And he's somebody with a discerning ear for sure. And so
very much so.
If he liked it, it's a good sign. And then another guest on the show, Jamie Tate at the Ruckus Room. I don't know that he's still using his radar stuff, but maybe you guys should have a conversation about that. He used to use a radar system that then went to the his mixing console. He mixes through a Harrison desk, and man, did it sound great. And he was getting amazing sounds. And one of the things that struck me about his mixes too was he seemed to be able to get really bold through the outboard gear.
That's what I was talking about earlier, man.
Right.
I'm telling you, there's something about it. I can't put my finger on it, or I don't know what the specifics of it all are. But yes, you can. I remember I heard a record. The thing that got me first interested in radar was I heard this record called Poses by Rufus Wainwright. Are you familiar with him at all?
I know the name.
So Poses by Rufus Wainwright was done by this engineer named Pierre Marchand, who also did like Sarah McLachlan. He's a Canadian producer. And it's just a lovely sounding record. I mean, it just sounds, it's like the best of everything in sonically. It's not super dense. Sometimes it's very sparse, but everything just sounds so good. And I read an article about him, and he was saying, yeah, he has this radar, and the sound of it is just, he can't find anything that sounds like it, and he loves it. And so I remember I went out and I found one. They were cheap. I mean, at this point, they were like $2,000, for a machine that was probably $25,000 in 1998,
Yeah.
And I got it home, and man, I mean, well, I had like a Digi 002 at the time, and then I like got this rig, and it was like, holy cow, is this a different league of sound? I remember thinking just what a jump it was and how much easier it got to record all of a sudden. And it's like that technology is pretty old. I mean, they were making those machines in like the early 2000s, and they still stand up today to just like, I downloaded a big thing where somebody had done a bunch of loop back tests with a bunch of converters, and I didn't listen to them all, but I picked out like 8 that I wanted to see what the different colorations sounded like. And I still was picking the radar. I was still like, yeah, this is still like the Digital Audio Denmark and all these fancy like new ones. And they just, none of them sounded as musical to me as the radar. And the Burl was probably the closest that I heard to that kind of vibe. The radar and the Burl actually to me sound somewhat similar. It's not quite as, like, the radar doesn't get pushed it doesn't like get distorted when you push it hard like the Burl does.
Right.
But at a sort of just like normal, not pushing it level, they're very similar to me.
Do you feel like the time you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has not gotten you anywhere? Have you been looking for a simple or straightforward step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? What if you could learn that process from a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all your mixing struggles and could coach you through them? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is for you. Now you can discover a proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Here's a quote from one of the students. "Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. This was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. Look, when you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and go check out Craig's ultimate snare mixing trick now for free." So I'm looking at various things that are there, and they have these IZ Otari Radar 2s, but then there's also Nyquist 96K or Radar 192 stuff. Which is the one that is what do you have to say about any of those?
Well,
by the way, we record these well in advance, so Anthony and I have an advantage over your rock stars to go scoop up the good ones. I'm just kidding. I'm not kidding.
Yeah, so the deal is that, there's a bunch of different options that you got to look for on them, because like some of them don't have all the analog cards in them. Some of them have different digital cards. And so the Radar 2 was the first 24-bit version of it that they made.
Right.
I don't think you can get, I had ADAT cards in mine. I had a Radar 24 and it had ADAT cards in it. So all of the ins and outs could go through light pipe.
Right.
And so that's how I used it as a converter for Pro Tools.
Now, just quick aside, do you remember having to carefully select your light pipe cable? Like, was a high-end light pipe cable something that you wanted to have as part of that too? Or
no,
was that not a consideration?
I didn't go to great lengths. I probably bought the not cheapest or most expensive thing. Yeah. I probably just bought some, quality, but not crazy expensive.
Right. It's like trying to choose the best contractor. You choose the one who gives you the bid in the middle.
Yeah. So, I don't get too obsessive about that. It always sounded great to me. Yeah. So anyway, I had the 24 and it had 24 channels of the Nyquist 2496 cards in it, and then the ADAT card. Those were the important things. The session controller is awesome because it gives you the greatest metering. Like the metering is way better than Pro Tools, and it's just like right there in front of your face all the time, no matter what. Yeah. I always loved that about it. But really, it's just the sound of it was just exceptional. And so now what they've done is that they've made these they're very expensive, but there's these little chassis that have the Dante on them that the analog cards from the Radar just slot right into.
Cool.
And then you can just run them that way. So that's what I'm thinking about doing. But I'm going to get the Radar first and because I can hook the Radar up to my Orion with 2 ADAT ports. There's like 16 IO of light pipe on the Orion. So I'm going to hook the Radar up to that, listen to it for a while. If I really decide that the sound is something that I'm set on, then I'm probably going to try to get the full 32 channel system. That's cool. That would be my next big move.
Do you remember if the radar units, I know we're really stuck on this question right now, but do you remember if they are quiet in the studio or if they are, yet another piece of gear with fans in it that you have to figure out where to put?
They are the latter, very much so.
Okay.
They're very noisy.
Okay. All right. Good to know.
Yes.
I've recently had to come to terms with that again because Rockstars, some of you may be wanting to hear this too, but I switched over my studio rig, got the new Mac Mini M1 with the silicon chip, successfully got my Pro Tools and almost all of my plugins working. I think the Acoustica plugins I don't have working yet, but I think that's just because I didn't put in my licenses or whatever. And that is working and it's cool. And I had to use an external Thunderbolt chassis, the Avid chassis, and put the HDX card in it because I have the old HD 192s. And it's working pretty good. But by the time I was done hooking up all these things and using the chassis and everything, I'm starting up the computer and I'm like, damn, why I'm still hearing the computer in the back of the control room. So unless you're, I guess that's the takeaway, Rockstars. Be aware that having a very quiet control room is totally worth pursuing. And every time you buy some new gear, consider, is this going to be loud or is it going to be quiet too? Unless you have an actual machine room or closet that you can put your gear in. I don't. So just
I second
reminder.
all that. Yeah, I'm actually getting this radar comes with one of those quiet boxes, those little racks that are like the silent racks. So I would not advise having a radar not in some kind of an enclosure to quiet it down in your control room. They're too loud. You can actually put a lot quieter fan in. You can probably get the noise of it down 60% with the right fans. But it's still, for me, unacceptably noisy in a control room like that without it being in a box. When I had mine, I always had it in this box that I had made for it that was like padded on the inside and had a little bit of ventilation on the bottom, but it probably wiped out 95% of the noise. Yeah.
Now I'm looking at the back of one of these units and you've got like, I don't know if this might be an older one.
They're all a little different.
Yeah. It's got like card slots. So you could probably put in like those ADAT or Dante card.
No Dante in the original radars. That's
right.
Dante. So they can do AES or SPDIF.
Yeah, I see that. I see ADAT outputs are built in, and then there's...
Yeah. Well, the ADAT, that's an additional card, so not all of them have that ADAT. So like all that, they're kind of built to order, so they're all configured a little differently. Some of them won't have any digital I/O except for the SPDIF and the 2-channel AES. Some of them will have TDIF. Some of them will have ADAT. Some of them won't have all 24 channels of the analog I/O. See, at the bottom right is all that analog I/O cards sit down there.
And then I think I must be looking at an old one because this part of it looks like an old Mac computer. It's like DVI screen outputs. And like an old mouse input and Ethernet and headphone jacks and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's definitely an old one. Well, I mean, it's a PC basically. So like you can also hook up, you hook up a screen to it and you kind of like troubleshooting. You have to hook up a screen to it and a keyboard. There's like a special keyboard that you can hook up to it if you don't have the control surface.
Well, it's exciting stuff, man. And it's fun, it's a fun reminder that sometimes the old tech can be worth, integrating into your new studio setup because, ultimately we're all in search of whatever sounds best to us.
Yeah. And at this point, I think a lot of the moves that are happening are very much lateral for like the last 10 years when it comes to like all the converter sound and all this stuff. It's like they might be able to get the specs up, these little hairs here and there.
Science.
But like to me, I'm always just like, I long ago accepted the idea that something that was made 50 years ago can sound something better than something that was made in the modern times. And that's quite often the case in our business. And I think converters have gotten to that point where it's like kind of there. It's like, to me, that's still the benchmark sound, even though it was developed 15 or 20 years ago. It still sounds the best to my ears, and it's pretty identifiable to me. Like I'm able to pick it against my interface every time. So, some people it would be meaningless, and I can totally get that too. And they're probably smarter than I am because they're not worried about those little minutia. But to me, I'm I'm looking for that last little 5% or whatever I can get to make things a little better.
Awesome, dude. Well, I think we've hit our time frame for this podcast interview. Thank you again for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars. It's always fun to hang with you and have you back. And a reminder, Rockstars, give us a shout in those comments. Let's do something cool at Anthony's studio, and that includes cannonballs and mixing tips or something like that.
I'm game. Thank you so much for having me on, Lidge.
Yeah, our pleasure. Let the Rockstars know where can they go find you online, Anthony, if they're ready to make their next amazing sounding record or live to 2-track recording or what have you, or just go swimming, I guess. How should they reach out to you?
My website is anthonygravino.com, Anthony, Gravino.com. And I'm also on Instagram. That's it. You can get my contact information there and shoot me a line, and I like to talk. So if you want to talk about making records, I'll talk about that all day.
Awesome, dude. And then hopefully when this is out, Charlie Hunter's record will be out too, and we can, or it's probably already out. Actually.
Oh yeah, that record came out a long time ago. But
oh yeah, I don't think I have that in the playlist. What's the title?
It's Super Blue is the name of the album by
Super Blue
by Kurt Elling and Charlie Hunter. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I do have it in here. I'm gonna Super Blue Kurt Elling. There it is. Bam. All right, it's in the playlist. Rockstars, go scroll down and check it out. Anthony, you rock, dude.
Thanks, Lidge. It's always a pleasure. Love you.
All right, man. Talk to you soon. Cheers.
Peace.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible: OWC, Spectra 1964, Sampley, and Isotope. Remember to use these coupon codes for special discounts. At isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription to access many of their plugins. At Sampley.app, sign up for a free account with 2 projects now, and later use the coupon code RSR20 to get 20% off the first 3 months when you upgrade to a pro account. At recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course for a limited time. You will find links to all these awesome sponsors in our show notes. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars: Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in our next episode. Cheers.